We'll now proceed to the consideration of general business. Clerk.
General business order of the day number 7, relating to the Albanese government, resumption of debate on the motion moved by the Leader of the Nationals in the Senate, Senator Mackenzie.
Minister.
I recall this debate well. I think I had tables getting to it a minute and 30, or more than I thought, more than I need, and probably more than my colleagues deserve to hear. This resolution, as I was indicating a few weeks ago, incorporates Senator Mackenzie's name. It references transparency and accountability, and then goes on to use the phrase rank hypocrisy. And I think I indicated a few weeks ago that the gravitational force of all those phrases being in the same paragraph together is probably enough to make planets collapse and solar systems collide. Senator Scarr's got a contribution.
If you would like to resume your seat, Minister. Senator Scarr.
Acting Deputy Chair. Personal reflection on Senator Mackenzie. If perhaps just for the benefit of the committee of the chamber, Senator Ayres might be willing to withdraw.
Senator Ayres, considering I was reading materials for what's about to come and I wasn't listening as closely as I might normally be, could I ask you to assist the chamber by withdrawing?
I'm very happy to withdraw on a Thursday afternoon anything I might have said that might offend anybody in any way. There is a high level of sensitivity on the other side of the chamber, I have to say, for any point where there is a collision between the things that they complain about today and the things that they did over the course of the 9 sorry years between 2022 and 2016. Those were very sorry years for Australia indeed. Now, of course, while all the partisan points have been made in relation to Qatar Airways, of course the government has been getting on with the job. The decision that the minister made in relation to those questions was uncontroversial and in fact identical to decisions made by previous coalition ministers before her. The government has considered carefully the issues and has directed the ACCC to continue monitoring developments in the aviation industry, and that will be in the interests of aviation passengers.
Thank you. The question is Senator Scarr.
I rise to make a contribution on this matter, if I could. The point I'd like to make, Madam Acting Deputy President, first I'll acknowledge Senator Ayres was gracious in terms of his withdrawal late on a Thursday afternoon. The point I will make is this. This is not like previous decisions on a number of bases. The first is that the department contacted the minister and recommended or sought a negotiating mandate with Qatar, and that negotiating mandate was not pursued. And it simply doesn't make sense in a context where there are capacity issues in terms of flights out of major hubs in Australia, such as Sydney and Melbourne, and in my home state of Brisbane, Queensland, the airport of Brisbane, which Senator James McGrath is very, very familiar with, as he spends a lot of time there, as we all do. It didn't make any sense for those additional flights not to be granted, or at least some of the claimed or sought-after flights to be granted permission. It simply didn't make any sense. And certainly, in the context of my home state of Queensland, it is probably one of the few occasions where Senator McGrath, and I think I can speak for him on this basis, and I agreed with the Deputy Premier, Premier Miles, that Queensland needed those additional flights. So the Labor Deputy Premier in Queensland made the point that Queensland needed those additional flights. The department advised the minister that negotiations could be entered into with Qatar, so perhaps not all of the flights sought by Qatar could be granted landing rights, but perhaps only some. and the minister did not take up that negotiating platform and simply refused carte blanche for any flights to be given with respect to those most sought-after landing rights at the airports in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. And that is the issue. That is the issue. And the question is, what happened in the discussions between the minister with Qantas, and in particular the then Chief Executive Officer of Qantas? What happened in those discussions? And I think in the name of transparency, which is referred to in my colleague Senator Mackenzie's motion that is before the chamber, the Australian people have a right to know. They have a right to know in terms of the bases upon which the minister refused to grant those additional flights. Why do they have a right to know? Because they're paying too much. They're paying too much to go overseas and visit relatives, or for tourist purposes, or for whatever purpose. They're paying too much. And that's the basis upon which the Australian people have a right to know why those flights were denied. This isn't about us. It's not about us. It's about the Australian people having access to cost-effective flights in the middle of a cost-of-living crisis. And this is a real material issue for the people in my home state of Queensland. And this debate has been going on for some time. And on that point I agree with Senator Ayres. But the reason it's been going on for some time is the information hasn't been provided. The relevant explanation hasn't been provided. At one stage, the debate was distracted in relation to human rights issues arising from an incident in Qatar a number of years ago. But that didn't make any sense at all, that the minister would say, well, there's an opportunity for Qatar to have flights out of Adelaide but not out of the more populous airports of Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane because of human rights issues. If human rights are the issue, it should have applied across Australia carte blanche. It just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. So the Australian people want to know what is going on here, because they have a right. They have a right, and we have an obligation. We have an obligation as the Australian government to make sure, as far as we can, that the Australian public have access to cost-effective plane travel. That's the whole crux of the issue here. And we're still debating this after several months at the end of a sitting week on a Thursday afternoon, because that information and that explanation has not been provided in a way that makes sense, not to us, but to the Australian people. This issue is only being pursued because the Australian public are still asking questions. What is going on? Why did the minister make that decision? Provide the information. Tell us the basis for the decision. It is simply not good enough to respond to the legitimate questions which have been raised by senators in this place to say, well, my decision was made in the national interest. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. It's not good enough in circumstances where, when you look objectively at the evidence, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense as to why you wouldn't have provided a competitor to Qantas with those landing rights, which by its very nature would have meant that Australians could access flights because of the resultant competition at a lower price. And that's the crux of the issue. No more, no less. That's the crux of the issue. And that's why we, on this side of the chamber, have been diligently prosecuting this issue. And we will keep prosecuting this issue because this is of great significance to the Australian people, because the Australian people have a right to know why this decision was made, because this decision has had a negative impact upon their ability to book air travel at the lowest price practicable. And that's why we're raising the issue. And we'll keep raising the issue. We will keep raising the issue. And I commend my colleague, Senator Mackenzie, for taking such a leadership role in terms of the prosecution of this issue.
Thank you, Senator Scarr. And the question is that the motion moved by the Leader of the Nationals in the Senate be agreed to? Those of that, those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Those against? We cannot divide, as it is after 4:30, so the matter will be considered in a deferred vote in accordance with the usual processes.